You don't feel poor because you're bad with money. You feel stuck because no one ever explained the game to you. Not in school, not at home, not anywhere that mattered. So you grow up believing a quiet story. Work hard, save what you can, don't mess it up, and somehow, someday, things will be okay. But deep down, you already know something feels off. You look around and notice people who don't seem smarter than you. They don't work longer hours. They don't look more disciplined, yet their lives feel lighter. They worry less. They decide faster. They move through life with a kind of calm you don't have, and you can't figure out why. This is where most people blame themselves. They think, I'm just not a money person. I'm late. I should have started earlier. Maybe this just isn't for people like me. But that belief is the real trap. Because the problem was never your intelligence. It was never your motivation. And it definitely wasn't your worth. The problem is that money has a silent rule that almost no one explains. If your money doesn't move, your life stays heavy. Most people don't realize this until years later. When effort stops translating into progress. When saving feels responsible, but somehow never enough. When every small emergency feels bigger than it should. And somewhere along the way, a quiet fear settles in. Not panic, not drama, just a steady pressure. The pressure of knowing that time is passing, and you're still standing in the same place. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. The world you live in today doesn't reward effort alone. It rewards participation. Not participation in hustle. Not participation in stress. Participation in ownership. And that word alone scares people. Ownership sounds complicated. It sounds risky. It sounds like something meant for someone else. So instead, people do what feels safe. They hold on tighter. They save harder. They wait. They wait for the right moment. They wait to feel confident. They wait until they understand everything. And while they wait, life gets more expensive. Decisions get heavier. Options quietly shrink. No alarm goes off. No warning sign flashes. It just slowly becomes normal to feel behind. What if I told you the stock market isn't the scary part of money? What if the real danger is never learning how it works at all? Most people imagine the stock market as chaos. Screens flashing, numbers jumping, people yelling. But that image misses something simple and important. The stock market isn't a place. It's a system. A system that quietly decides who benefits from growth and who only feels the cost of it. And here's the part almost no one tells beginners. You are already affected by this system, even if you've never touched it, even if you've avoided it your entire life. When prices rise, you feel it. When costs creep up, you adjust. When stability feels harder to reach, you blame yourself. But the system keeps moving, with or without you. This video isn't about getting rich. It's not about quick wins. It's not about beating anyone. It's about finally understanding the one tool that quietly shapes financial outcomes over decades. Not in a dramatic way. In a boring, steady, almost invisible way. The kind of way that doesn't show up on social media, but shows up in how you sleep at night. The truth is, most people don't fail with money. They just never get oriented. It's like being dropped into a city with no map, and then blaming yourself for getting lost. You were never given the rules. You were never shown the layout. You were just told to be careful. And caution alone doesn't build a future. It only prevents disaster. What you need isn't courage. It isn't confidence. It isn't even discipline yet. What you need is clarity. Clarity about what the stock market actually is, what it isn't, and why it matters so much more than people admit. Because once you see it clearly, something shifts. Fear softens. Confusion shrinks. And the idea of participating no longer feels reckless. It feels reasonable. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about finally understanding the environment you're already in. So if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but still not moving forward, if you've ever saved faithfully, yet felt strangely anxious anyway, if you've ever wondered how time keeps passing, without things feeling more secure, this isn't about fixing you. This is about showing you what was missing. And once you see it, you won't unsee it. Most money stress doesn't show up as panic. It shows up as small, daily weight. It's standing in a store, doing mental math you didn't plan to do. It's delaying decisions that shouldn't feel so heavy. It's that moment when something breaks and your first thought isn't "I'll handle it," but "How bad is this going to be?" You still function. You still pay bills. From the outside, everything looks fine. But inside, money feels tight even when you're careful. You tell yourself you should be grateful. Other people have it worse. You're not irresponsible. You're not reckless. So why does it still feel like you're always one step behind? This is the part people rarely talk about. Most financial stress doesn't come from big mistakes. It comes from doing the right things in the wrong system. You work, you earn, you save what's left. You try not to mess it up. And yet progress feels slow, almost invisible. You might even notice something strange. No matter how much you improve your habits, the finish line keeps moving. As soon as you feel slightly more stable, life asks for more. Rent rises, bills creep up, plans cost more than you expected. It feels like walking up an escalator that's quietly moving down. So you respond the only way you know how. You tighten control. You watch every expense. You hesitate before spending. You delay things you want, telling yourself later. Saving becomes your main strategy. Holding on becomes the goal. And at first, this feels responsible. Saving feels safe. Saving feels mature. Saving feels like protection. But over time, something subtle happens. Saving stops feeling empowering and starts feeling defensive. You're no longer building. You're bracing. You don't feel excited about the future. You feel cautious around it. And caution slowly turns into avoidance. You avoid learning about money because it feels overwhelming. You avoid looking too closely because you're afraid of what you'll see. You avoid topics like investing because they feel risky, confusing, or not for you. So you tell yourself a story. I'll focus on saving first. I need more money before I do anything else. I'll learn later when I feel ready. Years pass inside that sentence. What makes this harder is comparison. Not loud comparison. Quiet comparison. You notice others making moves that feel impossible for you. Buying homes. Taking breaks. Saying no to things you feel forced to say yes to. And instead of jealousy, you feel confusion. You're doing what you were told to do. So why doesn't it feel like enough? Here's the part that hurts the most. You start questioning yourself. Maybe you're not disciplined enough. Maybe you started too late. Maybe you missed some invisible window everyone else caught. That self-doubt slowly drains your energy. Because when you believe the problem is you, every solution feels exhausting. You try budgeting harder, tracking more closely, cutting again, but the relief never lasts. Because the problem isn't your effort. It's the structure underneath it. Saving money in a system that keeps moving forward is like standing still on a treadmill and hoping the scenery changes. You're not wrong for saving. Saving matters. But saving alone was never designed to carry the whole weight of the future. And nobody tells you that. They just tell you to be responsible, to play it safe, to avoid mistakes. So you do. And slowly, safety turns into stagnation. This creates a strange emotional loop. You feel anxious about money, so you avoid anything that feels uncertain. But avoiding uncertainty guarantees one thing. Nothing changes. You stay dependent on your next paycheck. You stay vulnerable to surprises. You stay alert but never relaxed. Even when your income grows, the feeling follows you because the foundation never shifted. This is why so many people say, I make more than I used to, but I don't feel better. Money came in, but security didn't. And here's the quiet truth hiding underneath all of this. You were taught how to earn money. You were taught how to save money, but you were never taught how money grows. So you treat money like something fragile, something that must be protected at all costs. You don't see it as something that can move, work, or expand. You see it as something that must be guarded. That mindset doesn't come from fear. It comes from missing information. When you don't understand how something works, you stay distant from it, and distance feels safe, even when it quietly costs you progress. This is why the stock market feels intimidating to so many people. Not because it's inherently dangerous, but because it lives outside their understanding. Anything outside understanding feels like a threat, so people either ignore it, or reduce it to extremes. They see it as gambling, or they see it as something only experts touch. Both beliefs protect them from engaging, but both beliefs keep them stuck. Because while you're standing still, the system keeps moving. Prices adjust, costs rise, time passes, and the weight you feel isn't because you failed. It's because you were trying to build a future with only half the tools. In the next section, we're going to talk about why this happens psychologically, not in technical terms, not with complicated language. Because once you understand why your instincts push you away from investing, you stop blaming yourself. And that's where real clarity begins. The human brain is very good at one thing: keeping you safe, not successful, not ahead, safe. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Your instincts weren't designed for long-term financial growth. They were designed for short-term survival. And the stock market feels like all three. When you hear words like investing, markets, or stocks, your brain doesn't think in calm timelines. It thinks in moments. What if I lose money? What if I make a mistake? What if I regret this? This is why saving feels comforting. When money sits still, your brain relaxes. Nothing is happening. Nothing can go wrong right now. Movement creates uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers fear. But here's the quiet problem. Your brain treats loss and growth very differently. Losing money feels like pain. Pain is louder. This is why people would rather avoid investing altogether than risk seeing their balance drop, even temporarily. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do. The issue is that the modern financial world runs on a timeline your instincts don't. Understand, your brain wants immediate feedback. The stock market rewards patience. Your brain wants certainty. Long-term growth requires uncertainty. Your brain wants control. Markets move whether you watch them or not. So when people first look at investing, they experience internal friction, not confusion, resistance. It's the same resistance people feel when starting something unfamiliar. The brain says, this feels risky. Stay where you are. And staying where you are feels like a decision, even when it's actually avoidance. Another psychological trap shows up here. We tend to judge experiences based on short-term outcomes. If something feels bad now, we assume it's bad overall. So when people hear stories about market drops, their brain fills in the rest. This is stressful. This is unstable. This is dangerous. But they're reacting to moments, not trends. It's like judging a long road trip by one pothole. The discomfort is real, but it doesn't represent the entire journey. There's also a powerful identity issue involved. Most people don't see themselves as investors. They see investors as confident, aggressive, numbers-focused people. And if that's not how you see yourself, you unconsciously exclude yourself from the category. I'm just not that kind of person. That belief becomes a wall, not because it's true, but because it feels familiar. And the brain loves familiarity. Familiar stress feels safer than unfamiliar growth. This is why people will tolerate years of low-level financial anxiety rather than face a few months of learning something new. Because learning puts you in a beginner position, and being a beginner threatens your sense of competence. So instead, people wait. They wait until they feel ready. They wait until they feel confident. They wait until it feels obvious. But confidence doesn't come before understanding. It comes after. There's one more mental pattern that quietly shapes behavior. We confuse activity with progress. Saving feels active. You can see the number. You can touch the control. Investing feels passive. You plant something and wait. Waiting feels unproductive. So the brain prefers the illusion of control over the reality of growth. But growth often looks boring, uneventful, slow, almost invisible. And the brain doesn't like invisible rewards. This creates a mismatch. The system that builds wealth rewards patience, but the mind rewards action. So people act in ways that feel good short-term and cost them long-term. Not because they're careless, but because they're human. Understanding this changes everything. Because once you see that your hesitation isn't a flaw, it loses its power. You stop thinking, I'm bad with money, and start thinking, my instincts were never taught how this works. That shift matters. Because behavior doesn't change through force. It changes through understanding. When people finally grasp what the stock market actually represents, their emotional response softens. It stops feeling like a casino. It stops feeling like a test. And systems are learnable. You don't need to outsmart anyone. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need to enjoy risk. You just need to stop letting short-term feelings make long-term decisions for you. The next section is where this becomes tangible. We're going to talk about the invisible cost of staying on the sidelines, not in dramatic terms, not with fear, but with clarity. Because the real cost of avoiding the stock market isn't losing money, it's losing time. When people think about the cost of investing, they imagine loss. They picture numbers dropping. They imagine regret. They imagine feeling foolish. So they avoid it. But the most expensive cost doesn't come from doing something wrong. It comes from doing nothing at all. And that cost is almost impossible to feel in the moment because it doesn't hurt loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up as a mistake. It shows up as time quietly slipping by. Here's the part most people miss. Money doesn't just sit still when you leave it alone. The world around it keeps moving. Prices adjust. Opportunities shift. Time continues whether you participate or not. So when your money stays still, it's not neutral. It's falling behind. There's no immediate pain signal. No sudden drop. No dramatic moment. Just a subtle gap that widens over years. Think about it this way. Imagine planting nothing in a garden. You didn't choose weeds. You didn't choose emptiness. You just didn't plant. Time passes anyway. And one day, you look out and realize something grew there regardless. It just wasn't what you wanted. This is what happens when money stays idle for long periods. Not because saving is bad, but because time changes the value of everything. What felt like enough 5 years ago doesn't feel the same today. And what feels manageable today won't feel the same 5 years from now. This is where numbers start to matter, but gently. Not to scare you, just to show scale. If your money grows slowly, your future options grow slowly too. And if your money doesn't grow at all, your future options shrink. Not suddenly, gradually. This is why people wake up one day feeling trapped. They didn't make reckless choices. They didn't ignore responsibility. They just relied on stillness in a moving system. And the system doesn't pause. Another invisible cost is emotional. When your money isn't growing, every decision carries weight. You hesitate more. You second-guess yourself. You delay things that could improve your life. Because when money feels fragile, everything feels risky. You don't take breaks easily. You don't say no confidently. You don't feel grounded. You feel exposed. This is the real tax of staying on the sidelines. Not stress from loss, but stress from dependency. Dependency on your next paycheck. Dependency on everything going right. Dependency on life not surprising you. And life always surprises you. The stock market isn't powerful because it makes people rich. It's powerful because it slowly reduces this dependency. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. People often misunderstand this. They think investing is about chasing more. But for most people, it's about needing less effort to maintain stability. It's about letting time share the load. When you don't invest, you carry everything yourself. Your work has to do all the lifting. Your income has to handle every future need. Your energy has to last forever. That's a heavy expectation, and it gets heavier as time passes. This is why the cost of waiting compounds, not just financially, but mentally. Every year you delay, the hill gets slightly steeper. Not impossible, just steeper. And that subtle change is what people feel when they say, "I wish I had started earlier." They're not talking about regret. They're talking about effort. They can still start. It just takes more momentum now. There's also a confidence cost. When you don't understand how growth works, money feels intimidating, so you avoid it. And avoidance creates distance. Distance turns into mystery. Mystery turns into fear. Years later, the idea feels even bigger and scarier than it ever needed to be. Not because it changed, but because you stayed away from it. This is why learning matters early. not because you'll act perfectly, but because familiarity removes fear. And fear is expensive. It keeps you cautious when caution no longer protects you. One more invisible cost shows up in identity. When you don't see yourself as someone who participates in growth, you unconsciously shrink your expectations. You plan smaller. You hope less. You settle earlier. Not because you want to, but because you don't want to be disappointed. And that mindset quietly shapes your future. People who invest don't just invest money. They invest belief. Belief that the future can be better without them, burning themselves out to make it happen. That belief changes how they move through life. They're not fearless. They're not reckless. They're anchored. Because when time is working with you, pressure eases. You stop needing everything to happen immediately. You gain patience. You gain perspective. And perspective is freedom. The tragedy is that most people don't realize the cost of waiting until they feel it years later. And by then, they blame themselves. But the truth is simpler. No one showed them how time and money interact. No one explained that the real danger wasn't volatility, it was delay. This brings us to the turning point, because once you see that the stock market isn't about risk first, but about time first, the conversation changes. It stops being about fear. It starts being about alignment. Alignment between how long your life is and how long your money is allowed to work. That shift doesn't require courage. It requires a different way of seeing. And that's what the next section is about. The turning point doesn't arrive as excitement. It arrives as relief. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. It's the moment you stop asking, why does this feel so hard? And start realizing, oh, I was never shown how this works. That realization changes the emotional tone completely. Control, protect, defend. You thought stability came from holding on tighter. But the turning point is understanding this. Stability doesn't come from gripping money harder. It comes from letting time help you. This is where most people finally release a heavy assumption and start seeing it for what it actually is. A long-term agreement with patience. You're not trying to outsmart anyone. You're not racing anyone. You're not proving anything. You're simply allowing your effort to extend beyond the hours you work. That's the shift. Before this moment, money felt like a fragile resource. After this moment, money starts to feel like a process. Processes don't need constant emotion. They just need consistency. This is also where fear changes shape. Before, fear said, what if I lose? After the shift, fear becomes, what if I stay frozen? And strangely, that second question feels calmer. Because staying frozen is something you can actually do something about. You realize that not every drop is danger. Not every pause is failure. Not every movement needs your reaction. The market stops feeling personal. It stops feeling like a judgment of you. It becomes what it always was. A reflection of many businesses, many decisions, many years. Nothing to argue with. Nothing to fight. Just something to participate in quietly. This is also where perfection disappears. You stop waiting to understand everything. You stop trying to find the best moment. You accept something important. Starting imperfectly is more powerful than waiting perfectly. That acceptance is freeing. Because now, the goal isn't to avoid mistakes. The goal is to stay involved long enough for time to matter. You begin to see money differently in your mind. Not as something you save until life happens, but as something that slowly prepares for life before it happens. That shift removes urgency. You don't need results next month. You don't need proof next year. You just need direction. This is where people often feel something unexpected. Calm, not because everything is solved, but because the path is clearer. You're no longer guessing. You're no longer standing still. You're aligned with how the system actually works. And alignment reduces friction. This is the moment people stop obsessively checking numbers. Stop reacting emotionally to headlines. Stop tying their self-worth to short-term outcomes. Because they finally understand what they're doing. They're building a background process. Something quiet. Something slow. Something reliable. That understanding is the real turning point. Not money. Not growth. Clarity. From here on, the conversation becomes practical. Not overwhelming, not complicated. Just a simple framework that matches this new mindset. A way to move forward without pressure. In the next section, we'll break that framework down step by step. Nothing advanced, nothing flashy. Just the essentials that actually matter.